You've joined the Betamax Video Club, rewinding back to our favourite films of the 1980s. My name's Rich Nelson, and tonight I've rented Steel Magnolias. Watching it with me is Gabriella, who can be found on Twitter at noir_or_never. Hi Gabriella, how are you?
I'm well, thanks, and you?
I'm very good. Thank you for bringing a film along that's a little bit different from what we normally have. What's so special about this film for you?
Oh, well, this movie and Dirty Dancing and Fried Green Tomatoes and like Beaches and those kind of movies are my mother's side of the family for women. If you do not like those movies, then you might as well not even be part of the family. So you're like obliged. But it's very special for me because I first watched the movie when I was about 10, so obviously a lot of it went over my head, but it was a favourite film of my grandmother, my mother's mother. And she died about 20 years ago, but she absolutely adored this movie. And it's also just like a bonding movie for my mom and I. We rewatched it yesterday together. And, we were you could have put a bucket under us as usual because we were sobbing so much. But it's just, it's just one of those movies that just absolutely gets it right when it comes to women's pictures. It reminds me so much of the women's pictures that were made in the early 30s. These are real women. They have snappy dialogue. They're interesting. They're not cardboard cutouts. They go through real things. Tragedies happen to them. They have organic responses to things. And it's just an absolute dream cast. I mean, no one is miscast. Everyone is amazing in it. So, and it's pretty much a role I think that Julia Roberts really shines in as well. I'm not a huge fan of hers, but in this movie, I think she just really gets it right from start to finish.
It's strange rewatching it now because I saw it, I think the only time I'd seen it previously was years ago, and I mean it wasn't, I suppose, a choice thing. It was I watched it with someone else who wanted to watch it.
Yeah.
And I guess from seeing most of the previous episodes of the podcast I've done, they are, I suppose, what you'd say action films or more mainstream sort of stuff. But I mean, watching this, it was so refreshing to see a film that's written, admittedly, by a man, but has female characters of all ages in there. I suppose the six main ones, the main women involved, but they're all people. They're not just there as wives of husbands. And something I mentioned in a previous episode quite recently was how in a lot of 80s films anyway, the female characters are often there purely as either eye candy or as a damsel in distress.
Yes, definitely, I agree with you there.
And yet in this film it turns it on its head because the men are either useless or buffoons in some cases, or a lot of the time they're written as awful people and you don't even meet them. I guess Daryl Hannah's Annelle's husband, for example, she's moved to this town to get away from him, and It turns out that they may not even actually have been married in the first place.
Yes, that part always, shame. The way that Shirley MacLaine's character gets that out of her, you're like, geez, can you be a bit more subtle? This poor girl, But I totally agree with you. It's like towards the end of the film when Sally Field says, I find it to be, humorous, to be that men are supposed to be made out of steel or something, but her husband and her son-in-law and her sons can't even bear to see their wife, their daughter, their sister die, and she's the one who sits there while they take Shelby off life support. And I'm not hating on men or anything. You follow me on Twitter, as you know, I'm quite a firm feminist. But I think that is the case though. Women a lot of the time are called on to be the ones that are leaned on. Men, there is this machismo sort of tradition, but a lot of the time men have difficulties because of that, expressing their emotions, and because of that women sort of become the pillar, and that's, that is really is shown well, as you say.
In a sort of alternate universe, just to take it back, you could say that you look at Lethal Weapon, and Mel Gibson being mad and struggling to come to terms with the death of his wife, emotionally stunted throughout, and a lot of films where this is really part of the issue. But yet in the 80s there were, this isn't going to be a whole discussion about this, but there were a lot of films, and you've already mentioned a couple, where either the female characters or the writing behind it is so good and it stood out because it was so different. you said beaches, there's terms of endearment, and you've even
Yeah.
got the sort that go from like Baby Boom all the way to Aliens.
Yeah, exactly. It is the 80s is really a time when women's roles in films, I think, is really changing. Probably because the production code is completely collapsed by the 60s, and under the production code, women, have to suffer and all that kind of stuff. And even though women, of course, do suffer in movies in the 80s, they're often victorious. They're not forced to apologize for who they are. And like in previous films, where if, you found that a woman had to be a prostitute during World War II or something, the guy's like, well, you should have starved to death or something, In the 80s, it's like women are doing it for themselves. And then, there's the song that Annie Lennox and completely forgotten her name now. And she's an amazing singer and a legend, but sorry, my brain's up there. They sang
early.
that song together, So it is. I think the 80s is definitely when women start going, you know what? Sorry to swear, fuck off. We actually are people, and we are going to be treated like people. And I think that they started recognizing that in the film industry and going, you know what, we can actually make money out of movies where women don't just stand there, as you say, with a short skirt on and go, eh. Even in Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I mean, who is it that really helps him? I can't remember that actress's name, who I really like. But she freaking uses a rocket launcher. She flies the plane. She gives him lip. I mean, I love her character. So yeah, definitely the 80s is when it starts coming out. And then I think it gets even more expanded on in the 90s. And nowadays, I don't know, I feel like we're going backwards a little bit. But yeah, won't go into that right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree with that. I think in the current climate, I mean, we've seen, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago when they remade Ghostbusters with all women in the main roles anyway, and that film got slated, and it wasn't, I mean, that wasn't the main reason. I mean, the film wasn't particularly good, but it just feels a bit like times have changed a little bit, and maybe not for the better, where a lot of the films with a large female cast, they tend to be either an attempt to remake Bridesmaids or something that in another world could be an all-male cast, but they haven't really changed it an awful lot. Was it Bad Mums, I think we saw quite recently? Yeah.
God, don't even. It's just like now this new thing of they want to remake, Lord of the Flies with women. And I'm like, that would not have happened with women on an island. We would have all been, we wouldn't have liked each other. We wouldn't have like pushed each other off of a cliff with a boulder. Goodness gracious. It's a book about toxic masculinity. I mean, like, anyway, never mind. I won't go on a rant. I'm so sorry.
No. I mean, every time I take my kids to soft play, it feels like Lord of the Flies, but it's a scary environment. And can I just put it on record before I forget? I think this may be the first podcast ever that has referenced Steel Magnolias and Commando in a positive way, and
Wow.
I think that should be put on record somewhere.
That's good. That's what I'm here for. I mean, call on me anytime.
Thank you for bringing one of the all-time greats to this, and I mean Commando.
Oh.
Ah.
I'll let you
Sorry.
get away with that one.
Thank you. I'll come to the film itself. Now, I mean, this came out, according to IMDb anyway, 30 years ago, so 1989.
Yeah.
And I always like to talk about some of the films that the director also did. Now, this was directed by Herbert Ross, who directed Footloose, the original,
Oh,
and
okay, wow.
and Funny Lady.
Oh, lovely. I didn't even know that. Sorry, I did zero research before this, but that's what you're here for, hey?
Yeah, I had to do something while I was watching the film.
Nice. That's really cool because I love both of those movies. And actually, both of those movies have interesting female characters as well. So
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, I'll come into it a little bit later, but apparently Herbert Ross didn't get on with a lot of the cast, and he had some issues. I think his wife had died quite recently, and I think the characters are actually kind of ganged up on him at one point and said, stop being a dick.
I don't blame them then. Yeah. Sorry. It's not their fault that, this is going to sound so insensitive, but it's not their fault that his wife died. You still need to be professional. Gosh, I sound like a bitch there, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
And because this was based on a play, and I kind of read that either during or after watching the film, and you can see very clearly is a play that's been adapted for the screen. There are sort of very distinct sort of acts within it. I mean, the first one we open and it's Shelby's wedding, or
Yes.
Julia Roberts, and it's set in Louisiana, and it's all very sort of twee in a certain way. I mean, I suppose to people who don't live in that kind of lifestyle, Shelby calls Sally Field mama,
Yes.
and you've got the husband and the sons like idiots running around. How do you clear birds from a tree with a gun?
Oh God! And then the firecrackers, and as you say, you can also see that it's based on a play because it's got very distinct locations in which it takes place. It's it's their house, it's Truvy's beauty shop, it's the church. It's very distinct locations, as you say, and definitely the film is sort of sectioned up into almost acts, as you say. And the beginning of the film is so interesting to me because it's this idyllic lifestyle. It's Shelby's wedding, as you say. She's still childlike, she's still innocent. And if you haven't seen the movie before, you won't really expect the tragedy that's going to come after the wedding, all that kind of stuff that's going to happen, until actually you get to Trevi's beauty shop and Shelby has her first terrible diabetic fit. And then you start thinking to yourself, wait a minute, maybe it's not all peaches and cream kind of thing. So, yeah.
It seems like it's set up as a sort of romantic comedy in a way. You've got the dad and the sons. You've got Shelby's husband-to-be, who, let's be honest, Jackson, whose role in the film is, I don't know, is he eye candy? I don't know. He doesn't do a lot. He doesn't contribute an awful lot, and he's one of those sort of very generic, sort of handsome actors who kind of stands there. I mean, he's one of those I've recognised from other films, but doesn't stand out in any way because he's not important.
Yeah, no, he's not very fleshed out. I mean, I think he's just supposed to be. He's a typical Southern male who is spoiled. He doesn't fully understand his wife's illness. He wants a son, all that kind of stuff. He's very traditional. Like Shelby, he's been spoiled. And, there's that whole thing of before the wedding where, he comes in and he says to her, I'm going to convince you that we're going to get married and all that kind of stuff. And you think it's like this childish game that they're playing with each other, because they really are kids. I mean, I don't think either of them can be, he's probably in his early 20s. She's probably also very young. They're both very childlike. It's not much to him, as you say, which is actually kind of unfortunate because the actor whose name I've forgotten is actually quite a good actor. He was very good in American Horror Story and stuff like that. But as you say, he's not really given much to do beyond being sort of the husband who expects very traditional kind of things from her. And yes, he is eye candy, just to fill that in. I mean, I think he's very handsome, So, but then again, I also think Tom Skerritt, who plays the dad, is handsome. So, that's just me.
Tom Skerritt is handsome, and he was also in Top Gun. So
yes, well, I mean, anything with Tom Skerritt, I'll watch, I must say, and I love Top Gun. So, as you say, he's one of the best parts of that movie. Anyway, getting back to Steel Magnolias. Sorry, I digress.
Well, I've just had a look. Julia Roberts would have been 22 when this film came out, so very early 20s. But something else I only found out in doing the research was this was originally meant to be Meg Ryan. Who played that role, and she dropped out in order to do When Harry Met Sally. Yeah, no, I'm
much better suited to her, I think.
Yeah, I think. This is funny. I mean, always seem to look at these like, who could it have been?
Yes.
And that was the only role that I guess probably, or certainly had some information about having someone else in. But it did turn out quite well because I mean, this was Julia Roberts' kind of first big role, really.
Yes, it's Pretty Woman and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I'd never. I suppose I was still quite young, but I wasn't aware of her at all before Pretty Woman came out. But yeah, she'd been in this and other bits and bobs. But I suppose it's not bad. I mean, she's not carrying the film as such. There's such a strong cast around her.
Yeah, definitely in terms of the older woman. Yeah.
And yet the film opens with Annelle, or Daryl Hannah, sort of walking into town, and she goes up to the beauty salon looking for a job, and we get full Dolly Parton.
Yes, I love her so much.
What a great role for her. It's I mean, I haven't seen her in a lot of films, but again, I know very much who she is. And this just seems to be almost like it was written with her in mind.
Yeah.
She just sort of spends the whole film almost being this dispenser of wisdom, or Dollyisms, as I wrote down.
Yeah.
Do you know which philosopher said that? Dolly Parton. Yeah. And people say she's just a big pair of tits.
She is perfect, and as you say, I mean, when Chuvy does her hair, and she's like, "Oh, my work tends to be poofy when I'm nervous," and Dolly Parton's like, "Don't worry, I sleep with toilet paper around my head, so it gets pretty smushed in that process." And I'm like, that is so Dolly Parton. I could totally imagine her sleeping with toilet paper around her head, and you would be totally fine with it because it's Dolly Parton, you know. And she just looks. I mean, my mom was like, "Oh God, look at her waist. It's so tiny." I'm like, there's just so much to love about her in this movie, as you say. And she is definitely a dispenser of wisdom. I love when she says to Olympia Dukakis's character, Clarice, she's like, "I think there's a story there," you know. And she's already sussing up a situation, which is great.
I suppose if you're in a small town and you're working in somewhere like a salon or hairdressing or something like that, that's where you learn a lot about people.
Yes.
I mean, one of the things she said that I wrote down was, "There's no such thing as natural beauty."
Yes, Nell repeats it after her. It's like a mantra kind of thing. But I mean, you know, when you're in the beauty industry, that is so true. I mean, my mother's a qualified beautician, and she pretty much has the same thought process, really.
It's not just gossip either. It's, you know, you learn about, you know, when people go there for, and again, sort of slight spoilers going ahead, but, you know, this film is based around events.
Yes.
You've got weddings and people coming home and the stuff at the end, and you're doing people's hair and making them look pretty for these events. And there's the tension between Shelby and her mum. And I should have made more of an effort. Now, Sally Field is Julia Roberts' mum, and her name is it Mullin?
Yeah, it's Malin or Malin. I mean, the characters seem to sort of either pronounce it as Malin or Malin. So
Yeah.
I sort of just go with Malin.
She was, I found her quite terrifying.
She is. She's strict. She has to be, though. I mean, as you said, she's got a bit of a buffoon for a husband. She's got a daughter who's been very sick. I mean, she's been the one who's had to be in control the most of the time. You know, everyone leans on her. And my mother doesn't like the part where Shelby has her fit, and, you know, she talks to her like she's 5. And I said to my mom, but the problem is that, you know, she has to do that with her in order to retain control of the situation, because if she doesn't do it, then the fit is going to get worse and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a really scary scene. As you say, Sally Field's character is kind of scary because she's so strong. But I actually just adore her in that part as well.
Because this is where Shelby has a fit while she's being sort of dolled up, and they do mention that it's diabetes, but I mean, they're pouring juice down her throat. I suppose it's being a parent of that, you know exactly what to do, and I guess after a certain amount of time, it probably just becomes almost second nature. But to see particularly Annelle's reaction to it, you've got people of various backgrounds and different ages and experiences, seeing a mum basically grab her daughter around the throat and shove orange juice down there.
Well, you know, I mean, the thing is, you know, as I said, it's about taking control of the situation because, you know, I mean, she's whacking the juice away. She's going, "If you don't leave me alone, I'm going to leave." And she says, "Oh, I'd like to see you try," and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, yes, having someone have a anxiety-induced diabetic fit is not exactly going to be something you can handle well unless you're used to it, as you say, because even Truvy says to her, you know, should I get her a cookie? And she says, no, juice is better. And as you say, it's about knowing what to do in the situation. And also, I mean, Annelle is so sheltered. I mean, I have seen people have fits and stuff before because, you know, I'm in education. And a few students have had them. And it's really, you have to be in control of the situation. Otherwise, everyone is running around like a headless chicken. They are screaming their heads off, making the situation about them. So you kind of have to just be like, okay, sorry, this is what we have to do, kind of thing, you know? So it is actually very realistic in that sense.
So at this point we've had the early indications anyway that Shelby is perhaps not in the best health. We had some comments earlier that she's been advised not to have children. And we go back to the house for the wedding, which is all the usual chaos, and like you mentioned, the idiots with the firecrackers. This is the point where, is it Weezer? She
Yes.
says to Annelle about her husband, and she said, men are the most horrible creatures.
They will ruin your life.
Speaking as a male, that's pretty accurate.
Well, I mean, poor Weezer hasn't had the best experience. And then, as you say, Annelle is telling her that, her husband's taken all of her jewels, all of her clothes, all of their money. And as you say, their marriage might not even be valid. So, it's true. Men can really do a ringer on you. It's they can really destroy your life. That's the thing that this movie is showing, is that women do have to sacrifice a lot for men in their lives. Often women don't really see a life without their husband. So
Yeah, but yet these are generally quite successful women, because Weezer's supposed to be quite well off.
She has more money than God.
Yeah, that was it. And I recognise that saying from, it was a Bond film a couple of years afterwards.
What's true is that in 48 hours, you and I will have more money than God. And Mr. Bond here will have a small memorial service, with only Moneypenny and a few tearful restaurateurs in attendance.
They stole it.
They
stole
did.
it from Steel Magnolias.
Well, they got to steal it from something.
Yeah.
Olympia Dukakis is Mrs. Belcher, who's, I suppose, recently widowed, but almost like a sort of, I wouldn't say leader of the community, but she's very well established, well known. Yeah. Now they're older again than the other ladies, but the sort of relationship between them, there's no fighting, but it's playful joshing in most of it. There's a lot of teasing going on, and this is when I suppose I occasionally make reference to the whole Bechdel test in films, because I mean that's the established thing where two women in a film who talk to each other about something besides a man.
Yeah,
this film
within the first 10 minutes or whatever it is. Yeah,
this film sort of properly smashes that, and it's mostly them taking the mick out of their various adventures and schemes and stuff. It's very refreshing, and they're a lot more, I would say, vicious with it, because it's generally well intentioned, but there's a lot of wit and barb behind those comments.
Yeah, there's a certain cattiness, but it's so well. The dialogue is whip smart. It's just it's the way they deliver it as well is just like absolutely incredible. I mean, Clarice Olympia Dukakis, she gets to the salon, she's like, I've just been to the Children's Opening Society, she says it with such pride, and you should think to yourself, gee, my goodness, she's a bit of a boastful cow, but you just love her so much that you're like, oh yeah, that's so wonderful, and the way she goes into Truvy's salon, and you can see she's been there a million times before, because she just whips off her dress and starts putting on her thing, and then, as you say, it comes out of the bathroom and says, I don't know how Malin hasn't murdered her husband, because he's been firing the shots. And I mean, the way that Weezer talks to Tom Skerritt's character, I think his name's Drum, and she he says, oh, you look like something shit, I can't remember. Then he says, oh, you look like regular shit, and she isn't taking his shit. So it's a as you say, it's a brilliant exchange. There's not for a moment where you think, oh, they're just like, oh, I have male problems, or my husband. It's, as you say, it's about their lives, what they're going through at that time. And as you say, they are very successful women. They're very interesting women.
Well, after this, we go to the wedding, or the wedding and the reception. This is where we can see how the film has dated, because they're all, especially the men, have ludicrous haircuts, mullets and ice hockey player haircuts and all that. The suits look like, it's hard to describe. I mean, it's the late 80s.
Oh, come to Krugersdorp, where I live. You will see people who still have hair like this and who are still dressed like this. Yeah, it's like the Deep South.
But are they ironically hipsters?
No,
Okay.
they are older Afrikaans people, and they still live in the 80s. So I mean, you just if you don't see one of them on the West Rand, you're not on the West Rand. Sorry. The wedding, I mean, you can see Shelby's plan of blush and bashful, and as her mother says, it's pink, and then that armadillo cake. I mean, that is just, my mother loves that, by the way. She's like, I want to have that cake.
That was magnificent. I mean, having a wedding cake, and you'd think for a wedding like that it would be the most traditional style, but it was a sort of family member who makes these red velvet armadillo cakes.
The idea of having a groom's cake. I mean, you've got the wedding cake and then you've got the groom's cake. I mean, I've never heard of that in my life.
Maybe that's a southern thing, but then it gave Tom Skerritt the line of when he was seen eating the arse end of the... just saying,
Nothing like a nice piece of ass. And I love how Weezer says, I am not going to talk to you. And then you're like, but you're talking to him.
they're like a married couple, except they're not.
No, exactly. They really are extremely well matched. I mean, as you were saying about the family member and how she says, I can make anything. And they're like, oh. And then she says, I can't make a snake. I don't have the counter space or whatever. And you're like, thank you for sharing that with us. And Weezer's like, you made this? And you're like, Weezer, just calm down, okay? It's cute.
Anything that could be roadkill, you can make a cake out of.
Yeah, especially if you're in the South.
Yeah. They go off on their honeymoon with the car decorated in condoms, which she'd made a big thing about not doing it.
It's going back to that sort of juvenile state that a lot of the men in the movie are in, that they think that's so funny, they think it's so hilarious. There's also some choice dialogue during that reception because, that part where they talk about that woman who's not wearing a girdle and they say it looks like two pigs fighting under a blanket. I just love that. And that whole dance, Happy on the Bayou where, those people are. And my mom said, if you go and look at Afrikaans people in South Africa, they love to dance long arm, as they call it, which is translated into long arm. And if you see them dancing it looks very similar to this. And it's the same kind of, southern sounding music. And this part of the movie shows that sort of light-hearted, romantic comedy, ha-ha kind of thing, which is very well done. And I also love the discussion between Shelby and her mom. That's also really good.
Well, one thing I did not make a note of was Malin spoke to Jackson and that was a kind of, I mean, I've referred to one of the previous episodes of World's Worst Pep Talk. This wasn't far off. This was kind of like, are you sure you know what you're doing? I said, well, one, it's a bit late now, you're married. And two, obviously they're still talking about the kids thing, which was an issue, but it just, way to bring a downer on it.
Yeah, it's not, and it's, the thing is, you get this kind of feeling that Millen doesn't really like Jackson, but you think to yourself, your husband is very similar to your son-in-law.
Yeah.
They don't, they don't understand the gravity of the situation. And, Jackson stands there with his arms crossed and you immediately know that he's not going to listen to a word she's saying. Yeah. And it's interesting, as you say, that it's happening during this festive occasion because that is once again another clue in the beginning of the movie that things are going to start sort of taking a very serious turn.
We've had the wedding, they've gone off on their honeymoon. Now, this is the end of, I suppose, the first act. The second comes back at Christmas, and now this is at some big sort of Christmas fair.
Festival thing, yeah.
Yeah, and there's a big football game going on, and now this is the first thing you see is Dolly Parton. I've just written Dolly rather than Truby. She's serving some food from, yes. I don't even know what it is. It looks like a big dustbin is emptying onto a tray.
It's like on this conveyor contraption thing, and I mean, if you haven't seen the movie like a trillion times like I have, you really don't know what the heck she's putting the food in either. You're like, is she just putting it in like a cardboard box kind of thing? But she's actually putting it in these two little things inside of a tray thing, and it's Bayou Gumbo or something like that, which does actually sound rather good.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't look like much of a delicacy the way it's being served, but then I suppose they'll probably come over here and see how people up here eat, and even our friends in the north with their deep-fried Mars bars.
Oh, God. I love Mars bars, but I don't think I could eat them deep-fried.
Believe me, they are wonderful.
Dory, it's the same, yeah. We also have food that people come and eat here, and they're like, whoa.
Yeah.
Kind of, yeah.
And Nell is here. Very different. She's high maintenance, but she's a world away from how she was at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, she's no longer this mousy, bespectacled little girl with rather terrible streaks. She's got her hair done. She's basically modeled herself very closely on Truvy, if you think about it, because they almost look like twins. The way they dress, the way their hair is. And then she talks to then Shelby appears, and they're like, oh, Shelby, hi, didn't know you were in this neck of the woods, and I always get confused because for me, I always forget that this movie takes place in a small town. For me, the movie just takes place. It's like it represents the whole South for me, which is terribly generalized and not the point at all. And I always forget that Shelby doesn't live in the same town anymore. She lives the parish over, or whatever they call it. But then, as you say, Daryl Hannah's character goes on about how she was drinking and smoking, and then she saw the error of her ways, and now she goes to church and all that kind of stuff. My mom and I always look at each other in this part. We're like, okay. So, and then she loses her contact lens, and she's like, nobody move my contact, or whatever. And my mom and I both wear contact lenses, and we're like, it's gone. It's gone forever. Sorry, you're never going to get it back.
Just be a bit blurry.
Yeah, no, just close your one eye and sort of walk around. I have done that before.
And in the football locker room, there's the scene because Mrs. Belcher has bought the local radio station. Yes. And is acting as a sort of commentator for this football game while all the young men are in various states of undress in the locker room. Yeah. And you've got Weezer sitting in the background just snarking away.
Yeah, she's like, would you say that this top is grape or aubergine? And then he's like, no one gives a shit about that crap. They want to hear about touchdowns and injuries and stuff. And Weezer's like, Clarice is like, excuse me, kind of thing. But I totally agree. I mean, God, it's like, we love cricket and rugby over here. And if you had to tell me the color of the uniforms, I'd be like, okay, moving on, kind of thing. I mean, ours is green. So there's not much to say about it.
Shelby has told her mum that she's pregnant. We're used to Hollywood films and I suppose most of real life where if someone tells their mother they're expecting a baby, it's handshakes and big hugs and everyone's happy. But Malin takes it the other way because she knows exactly what this could mean. Yeah,
she says, does Jackson actually listen when you go to specialists? I know that you don't. Does he? And then she won't look at Shelby in the eye, and eventually Shelby, says to her, "You're just jealous because it really rubs you the wrong way that you're not in control anymore." And when I was younger, I used to think to myself, "Oh yes, that's the truth. Moms always want to control the situation." But now that I'm older, I realize that Malin is coming from a place of real concern. She knows the seriousness of the situation. Shelby doesn't. Shelby thinks that everything's going to be wonderful. And then, you can see that Malin is like just about breaking down because she goes into the bedroom and she says, I'll tell you what I want. And then she says, I don't know what I want. And then Shelby says to her, but I need your support. And she starts crying and she says, I'd rather have 30 minutes of wonderful than a lifetime of nothing special at all. And you think to yourself that that's really true, but at the same time you're thinking, babe, how are you going to make it through this,
And one of the things that Malin says is that, she needs to put limits on her. And you kind of compare this to, Sally Field went through a bit of a run of playing these sort of mum characters. There was this and Mrs. Doubtfire and Forrest Gump. So for Forrest Gump in particular, I mean, he probably needed some limits.
Yes.
And I guess the whole point of that story was that he didn't, and he actually did all right. But we don't find out until again later on that exactly the poor health that Shelby's in, because they've talked, and it's a strange one to see that she talked about adopting, that she wouldn't be allowed to adopt because of her poor health.
Yes.
And yet, obviously, that while it's nothing that can be controlled, she can get pregnant. It's an odd sort of scenario, really.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, it's completely turning the usual rom-com or, melodrama on its head and not having a baby be a happy sort of event that sort of reconnects people. It actually drives a wedge between people because, that it's going to turn out to be not great. It's a very serious, as you say, it's a very serious, real moment as well, because a lot of the time when women do have are going to have children, it's not always easy. It's not always the case that everyone's like, oh, yay, it's so wonderful. It can be that people go, oh, God, you shouldn't be doing this kind of thing.
When the dad makes a big announcement of it at the sort of the gathering, and the mum runs off, and the other, should I call them the Magnolias? Does that make them sound like the Avengers or something?
Yeah, I like it.
So she kind of retreats, and they go, and I think they generally quickly suss out that while you can be happy, at least concerned for her and everything, and that's when they all kind of put their hands on each other, and it's like that's when it becomes a bit like a superhero moment.
Oh, I love that part where they're like putting, and then they keep moving their hands and stuff like that. That is something that women would do as well. You would definitely do that with your group of female friends. And as you say, it's a moment of joy. Oh, Shelby showed them, and she says, no, it's not a fact of a matter that she can't have children. It's that she shouldn't have children. And Weezer, who's normally, as you say, the snarky bitch, is the one who says, this child is not exactly great news. But as you said, they just say, we're going to see it through and we're going to be okay.
And then after this, we have a gap of, I suppose, best part of 18 months, because the next scene is the baby's first birthday, or Jackson Jr., of course.
Yeah.
That's something I don't often get. That seems like a huge vanity thing.
It's that whole thing of, male pride, male lineage, especially in places like the South, where, it reminds me a bit of The Godfather when your guy comes and says, I hope that their first child will be a masculine child, and you're like, okay. So it's like also in American movies where they call their son, and you're like, doesn't the guy have a name? Why are you calling him son the whole time,
Well, at least we know that he'll then have Jackson the Third and Jackson the Fourth, or Jackson Junior, however that works.
The junior of the second junior, yeah.
Now, Shelby goes off to get a haircut, nice and short. The Magnolias get together again and have a good laugh. I mean, the haircut it sounds awful, but the haircut looks awful.
Yo, it's 1989.
True, but she didn't look that happy with it.
No, she looks very much like she looks like Tinkerbell, like she did in it was Hook, I think. Yeah, similar kind of haircut.
And then they've gone to do her nails, and they find all the bruises on her arms. Now, of course, these days that would be more associated with some sort of self-harm sort of thing, but
mental health.
Yeah, but now it turns out that it's, and this is something I'm not very familiar with, but it's actually a sort of side effect or a thing of dialysis.
Yeah, well, I mean, it makes sense because, but she says, she describes it kind of weirdly. She's like, he's trying to strengthen my veins, and I'm like, but dialysis is about keeping the kidneys going. But I suppose veins are rather important in the body. So I also love Malin's crack where she's like, yes, Shelby has indeed been running nails up her arms. That's so funny. It's also, once again, that sort of that very clever dialogue that sort of cuts. It doesn't bog you down too much. It's a serious moment, but they get the dialogue and the delivery right so that you get a little bit of a laugh in there. And also the whole thing about the son being gay and Weezer coming in and saying, "Oh, I love my track lighting," and then you're like, "Oh, what's his name? Steve's okay." And you're like, "Oh God." Yeah. It's a part of the movie that shouldn't actually have aged well, but the way they approach it, it's actually quite funny, and it's very true to life. The guy has to tell his parents that he might be dying of cancer before they'll accept that he's gay, and a lot of the time it is still like that, even though it's 2019. So that's also a realistic part of the movie in a way.
Yeah, and I guess we're still at a part where that seems more like a son might be being made fun of for being camp rather than gay, I suppose.
Yeah, there's no homophobia really, yeah.
Shelby gets a new kidney from Mum. That all goes off supposedly peaceful anyway. And Nell is shacked up with the barman that she met at the wedding, and she seems to have gone back, certainly in appearance and demeanour ways, almost back to how she was at the beginning.
Yeah.
She's a little bit more strong-willed, but she's having a go at him for keeping beer in the fridge and taking the Lord's name in vain.
Oh, and they must pray and all of it.
It sounds like a really happy household.
Yeah, I mean, oh gosh, yeah. It's really not but it's very funny how he like, he says he swears and he says that and all that. I mean, I would also be rather. I mean, I don't drink, but I would be really pissed off if someone took something I wanted to drink and poured it out of it. Such a waste as well. I mean, beer has never been cheap. It's the thing. Well, maybe certain types of beer have never been cheap.
I don't care what you do in your refrigerator, but you will not keep liquor in mine.
Oh, Nell, for Christ's sake.
Who?
Christ.
Who did you say?
Christ, Christ, Christ.
Are you speaking of our Lord? Is that whose name you're taking in vain?
That's the one.
Oh, well, I am sorry, Sammy. But I'm not about to spend the next 50 years of my life with someone who I'm not going to run into in the hereafter.
Oh, Nell, God damn it.
I think we should pray.
Yeah, so we've had the transplant where I think the doctor's synopsis was it looks good.
Looks real good. He sounds like he comes from Chicago, but I like it.
Looks real good. Well, that's just what you want to hear. And then Annelle's bridal shower.
Yeah, oh God, in the crotchless panties. She's like, I know that this is from you, Weezer. You have the handwriting of a serial killer. I would like to apologize at this time though to all of the listeners for my awful southern accent, but I just have to say it in the southern accent. Sorry, so something comes over me.
But no, it's better because if I did it, it would sound offensive. But yeah, I mean, this is the part where I suppose we can gently mock. I mean, I think I wrote at one point that she's turned into a god botherer. I suppose that the idea of buying her saucy clothes for a bridal shower, obviously to make her uncomfortable. At least they didn't go into too much detail about that.
Yeah, I mean, Weezer just says, well, he wouldn't mind you reading the Bible in bed as long as you were wearing something inspirational, So it is a very, very funny. And I mean, also they have, I mean, it's a Halloween themed bridal shower. So it is a bridal shower. Hey, yeah, I always get confused with that part.
Yeah, I mean, it's something. I mean, certainly in the UK, I don't know if that's that big a thing. I suppose you've got hen parties and that, but yeah, showers for everything.
Well, we've become like that. We also, people here have started, at least we don't do that stupid reveal thing that they seem to have done in America where you reveal the gender of your child. I'm like, what difference does this make?
Yeah.
So at least we rather get Halloween themed hen party than that kind of crap. You can see it's still 1989,
Yeah. Well, Halloween's a big thing over there, I guess.
It is. It seems to have got I can't talk today. Sorry, gained global traction though, because they're even doing it here now. And I mean, geez, that's a very recent thing for us as well. I mean, it's summer here, for goodness sakes. We're in October. we can't even say, oh yeah, it's autumn. So that's what we're doing. I mean, no, but yeah.
There's a little part I just mentioned that there's another scene at the salon, and then we go back to the Jackson Shelby house, and Shelby has collapsed. The kid's screaming, the food's on. Of course, the dad seems more worried about, oh God, do I have to look after the kid?
God, he's really, because even before that, as you say, you see that she's looking after babies at the hospital, and she says that she's fed the one child and not the other. And that part always upsets me because she doesn't look good. She's in a fucking hospital. Sorry for swearing again. And she knows she's not feeling good, and yet she still goes home. I'm sorry, being a typical woman, because that's what we do, like we will be on death's door, literally, as in this case, and we'll be like, no, it's fine, I can go home and cook spaghetti and, put my kid in a clown suit, and I'm just like, if you had just said, you know what, I'm not feeling good, maybe I should go and have a checkup or something, maybe she could have been saved, because God knows how long she's been lying there by the time useless Jackson Senior gets there. God.
Yeah.
Oh, what's wrong, buddy? What's wrong? The kid's pointing where his mother has collapsed. I'm like, can you just turn? Can you just turn your head? You'll be able to see her.
Well, he might put hair out of place or something like that.
Oh God, yeah, no, it might have, he's perfect, like low waves. Yeah, no, he really, as you said, you don't really like him in the beginning of the movie, and then he really just loses traction because he's even more like, ugh.
And as this scene plays out, Shelby goes into hospital. He's the one that signs the form to turn off the life support machine, which I guess is his right as husband. But everything after that to do with the kid, it's either his family member or Malin who's looking after the kid. I don't. Do they have any interaction again? I don't think so.
It doesn't seem to not ring true, because you think to yourself, this guy is like an adult baby himself. I mean, how is he going to bloody look after a kid? You know, as you said, he looks so totally out of place when he comes home and discovers all of this, because he's like, oh, Jesus, you say, I have to actually pick up my kid. Hey, buddy, what? But I'm like, oh my God, you know, just. Ugh.
You know, I look after my girls, you know, and my wife's at work, and my mum always says, oh God, you know, things are different now, you know, back in when I was a kid, and we're talking 80s, early 80s here, my dad didn't, but that wasn't because he didn't choose to, it's because, you know, that was how things were. And it's weird looking back now, but, you know, and I love those days when I have the girls, and they are incredibly tiring, especially when I then have to go to work afterwards. But yeah, he's just portrayed as this, at the time I suppose, probably very normal guy. And look, and this is the thing that's aged the worst of the whole film, is that 30 years later he comes across as a useless father, and other than going off and earning money to pay for things, he doesn't really contribute an awful lot.
Yeah, but as you say, it goes back to that whole thing of he's clearly wanted a child, a male child, to carry on that family name. It's not really that he wants a son, you know, but almost as you say with this movie, it's almost like he wants to have a son that comes out of a box fully grown or something. I mean, as you say, it was the same with my dad. My dad had had 2 children with his first wife before he married my mother. So he actually taught my mom how to change nappies, bath the kids, all that kind of stuff. But he had to work, as you say. So my mom also leaned heavily on her mother. But my brother, like you, he looks after my niece more than my sister-in-law does, because she works away in the office and he works from home. So it has changed a lot. But yeah, it has aged badly. But the thing is that it's in the story, for the time, as you say, it is believable, because that's a lot of the time what, you know, men in that sort of, it's a very patriarchal society that they're living in, and so it doesn't actually seem unbelievable that he really wouldn't, you know, make much of an effort in the father department.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem to be much of a husband either, because if you go earlier into the movie, you know, she says to her mother, I think having this child will help a lot. And you think, help with what?
Yeah.
Are there problems in the marriage, you know? I think of that part in Cat on a Tartan Roof, where, you know, Judith Anderson points at the bed and says, when there's rocks, the rocks are there, you know, and you think to yourself, it's true, but it's also these two are just not well matched at all. I mean, Shelby's this wonderful, clever, bright girl, and he's just, as you say, like a clunk. So, yeah, he's not given much to do, poor thing.
If only they had Tinder back then.
Southern Tinder, Louisiana-style Tinder.
Tinder.
Yeah. The hospital scene is also very good. You know, how she's there and she's moving her legs, and she's like, we're doing Jane Fonda today, and the nurse says that the movement will be good for her. And then when she shows Shelby the picture, and she's like, just open your eyes, Shelby, just open your eyes. And then when Drum tries to massage her shoulders, and she's just like elbowing him to get away from her because she's trying to read to Shelby, and he's like, no, you need to get out. And she says, what if she wakes up for 2 minutes and I'm not here? And my mom said to me, she's like, you know, that's exactly what you do as a mother. You sit there until you are just about dead. And my dad actually would do the same thing. As you say, that's another thing that maybe is against men in this movie, is the fact that Drum, he's there, but he's like not really there. You know, what are you really doing? Your daughter's dying, you know? So I don't think, once again, he actually realizes she is dying. I think in his head he thinks she's going to wake up.
But this is, again, like a similar thing from other films where, you know, normally it would be the husband at the side of the bed. You know, even something like Rocky 2 was Rocky staying at Adrian's side the whole time. This wasn't about that. This was about the mum and the daughter. It's not about husband and wife, and it's the relationship, or I suppose this sounds insensitive, but it's quite one-sided at this point. But it's about Malin trying to maintain that with Shelby.
She's almost willing her back to life, basically, but it doesn't really work. Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned it earlier, and she'll come to it later, when the men can't be in the room when they turn off the machine. You know, Jackson is the one who's happily signed the form, and Tom Skerritt is kind of like, all right, okay, it's done now. Right, where's my
Yeah.
gun?
My mom says she can't even hug her own husband. I mean, that's so strange. And I say the fact of the matter is that she can't give up control yet because she has to be the one who makes sure that Shelby's funeral is arranged. And she says, you got to get a pink suit and you got to phone this funeral parlor. And because the men don't know what to do because they've had everything done for them. Clearly, they don't know how to actually act independently of the woman in this film. And then she drives and she goes and gets Jackson Jr., who runs to her. I love that part so much when he runs to her on his little leggies. And, Aunt Fern is also a lovely character. She doesn't get given much screen time, but you can see she's also a very caring, lovely woman because she's looked after him for God knows how long while this has all been going on, So and you see that beautiful scene of Sally Fields crying in the car like that, which shows what a fabulous actress she is because it's just so much. She doesn't say a word. You just know that she is dying inside. The way she's trying to not cry and she's trying to drive at the same time. And also the cinematography in that scene is stunning because you see the reflection of the bayou and all that stuff. So it's a great sequence.
It's just a shame Burt Reynolds wasn't driving her.
It's unfortunately I think he would have been making too many jokes. So wouldn't really have fitted in the Smokey, and then they would have had the sheriff chasing them. No, I don't think that would have fit. No.
Smoking the steel magnolias.
Yeah, no.
Another time.
No. A mashup I cannot see, I'm afraid.
I'll keep it to myself.
Where are we going? No, don't tell me. Let me guess. We are a bride in search of a wedding.
No.
No?
There is a wedding in search of a bride.
They're getting ready for the funeral. Malin's kind of taken charge with saying what everyone needs, and it's the part where you probably get it quite a lot in a small town where it's the guy who married Shelby. The priest is then delivering her funeral. Afterwards, we've got Jackson looking very sad, very morose, but that's about it.
Yeah.
Everyone else is, I say, getting on with it. I'm surprised Annelle's constant, and this is where I did write God bothering. That was when I was surprised one of them didn't give her a slap.
But then, the thing is that what I like about that scene is that all of the women come together. There's no need for any words. They all go to Millen at the graveside and they talk to her. But as you said, the thing is that Annelle says to her that, she gives her a verbal slap, basically, because she says, well, maybe I'm selfish, maybe I'd rather have her here. And Annelle says to her, I know it sounds simple or dumb, and maybe I am, but this is how I make sense of the situation. And it's showing that sort of thing of how people deal with things differently. She has her religion to make her feel better, to try and get her through that time. Because, that's the thing about this movie. It doesn't make sense that a character like Shelby dies so young. I mean, she's this vibrant, lovely person. She's a bit spoiled, but she actually really matures. And you think to yourself, it's not fair. It's not fair that she's gone. And then that's when Millen has her breakdown, because finally she's just had enough. She can't be strong anymore. And she says, I want to know why. She screams like that.
Oh, honey, are you okay?
I'm fine. I'm fine. I can jog all the way to Texas and back, but my daughter can't. She never could. Oh, God, I'm so mad I don't know what to do. I want to know why. I want to know why Shelby's life is over. I want to know how that baby will ever know how wonderful his mother was. Will he ever know what she went through for him? Oh, God, I want to know why. Why? Lord, I wish I could understand. No. It's not supposed to happen this way. I'm supposed to go first. I've always been ready to go first.
I'm always sobbing in that scene. I just cry so much. I mean, it's so heart-wrenching. And it's so true. I mean, my mom said to me the one time, her half uncle, he died before my grandmother. And she said to my gran, who was her full daughter, said to her, you're not supposed, your son, because he wasn't actually her son by blood, but she, of course, adopted him. And she said, your child is not supposed to go before you. And that's what Millen said. She says, I was always ready to go first. why. I want to know why, this has happened.
Well, I suppose that's nature in a way, isn't it? You're not built to do that with your kid. This is where she says that men are supposed to be made of steel. Apparently this was all done in one take as well.
Oh my gosh, I can just imagine it though. These women are just fabulous.
And then we get some light-hearted relief when she's offered the chance to hit Weezer.
She's like, you want something to hit this? Take a whack at Weezer. She's like, have you got mad? Have you lost your mind? And they're all like hosing themselves, and I always just start laughing. You're almost choking on your tears, but you're laughing at the same time. And Olympia Dukakis's delivery is just so fabulous. And then Clarice and Weezer have that lovely moment on the bench where she's like, you are a pig from hell. You are evil and you must be destroyed. And then she's like, this is my bench. And she's like, get what she says to her, I love you more than I love my luggage. And you think, God, that must be some very special luggage. But Clarice would have expected. And then she says, such a woman line as well, have your roots done. I mean, that is, it just sums it all up.
They are like two toddlers fighting, but they love each other.
It's a sort of friendship where they know each other's warts and boils and all that kind of stuff, and they still love each other, and my mom always says, just Clarice is really horrible to Weezer in this part. I always say to her, but Mom, Clarice should be given a medal for being friends with Weezer. She basically is Weezer's one true friend. Weezer is high maintenance, she's full of shit. I mean, she doesn't even want to talk about that guy that she's having that relationship with. He's so sweet. Yeah. And so you think to yourself, that in that moment, Clarice actually, as she said, things were getting entirely too serious and we needed to laugh. And it's that whole thing like Dolly Parton says in the next scene where she says laughter through tears is a lovely feeling. And that's very well put.
And this is pretty much it. I mean, we have another event when because Annelle's pregnant, she has her baby at Easter parade, Easter bonnet thing, Easter egg hunt.
Yeah.
And that's kind of almost, there's not a lot in that scene, but there's enough just to sort of show that next bit of closure. Yeah. Jackson's there being comforted by Malin, not his dad. I suppose it's nice because it finishes on a happy-ish ending, despite all the tragedy.
I mean, Trudy gets her shock because her husband finally comes through for her after being a tossed all movie, and he actually has a scene before the funeral early on in the movie that's quite profound, where he says, you can't imagine that stuff happening, and I think it makes him appreciate Trudy. And then, as you say, poor Annelle's husband who can't see through the bunny suit, how he even gets on that motorbike, you don't know. And Clarice, once again, is rather terrible about Weezer. Tells Jackson that story about her being the evil witch, and he whacks Weezer in the face. And the very clever thing about this movie is that it starts at Easter time with that wedding, a time of new beginnings. It ends at Easter, and, it's the coming child. And also it's very clever because Easter, is a symbolic time, if you want to go all really, philosophical, of new birth and stuff like that in the Northern Hemisphere, where it's spring and everything's, new is coming in. So it is actually a really clever little subtle thing that is put in there for the viewer to say, look, things are okay, as you said, despite the fact that we've lost our Shelby. We might be getting another new life, because Noel says to Millen, if we have a girl, we'll call him Shelby. And then Truby says, well, what if you have a boy? Shelby, I guess. It's very cute. And I love the ending. I love the music at the end and all of that stuff as well. And you get this lovely panning shot of that whole town. So I think also what the ending of the movie compounds is the fact that Jackson was never really part of their world. Yeah. And Jackson Jr. is. So that's why Jackson's not there.
I mean, he's half Shelby at the end of the day.
Exactly. See, he's more, he always feels more like Shelby's child than he does Jackson's, as we were saying. So it's actually fitting that he is with them at the end.
That was Steel Magnolias. We made it.
Yes.
Yeah, managed to talk about Commando and some other films.
I think we did well.
Anyway, Gabriella, thank you very much for bringing your, I don't know, was this a Betamax tape? Probably.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
Now, we've talked about your Twitter and your various love of older films. What in particular will people find on your Twitter feed?
Well, I focus, as I said, mostly on old Hollywood films, but I've been a classic film fan since I was 3. Um, like that sounds ridiculous, but one of the first classic movies I ever watched was Gone with the Wind. My mother still talks about it to this day and says she doesn't know I sat through that movie, but it's one of my favorites. So if you go on Twitter, you'll see me chatting all about classic films. You also get a few B grade films on there because I also love B grade films, and also I talk a lot about John Barrymore and Joan Crawford and Alan Ladd because they are my favorites. And I also have a blog, which is on WordPress, which is Pale Writer 2. And you can go on there, and I talk about all sorts of things to do with classic films. I also love horror films, so every now and then I tweet about that as well. But mainly also sort of more classic horror films, not really anything past the 1980s. And and you'll just go on there, and I love like chatting with people about movies and books, and the classic film community on Twitter is really lovely, so you should come and join us and we'll chat. And also, as I've been going on, I've been discovering more classic films from around the world, really. So I also, try and tweet about that. My favorites so far are from the UK. So yay for classic UK films, which a lot of the time are overlooked. I don't know why. They're so good. I mean, I love Brief Encounter. Give me anything with Margaret Lockwood. I adore it. So yeah, come on Twitter and we can have a chat about that if you feel so inclined.
Yeah, well, we'll make sure there's plenty of links to those in the show notes. I feel bad. I mean, this is probably kind of talked about before. I kind of missed most of that and sort of era, and it never really came into my world. So it's always nice to sort of remove myself occasionally from the 80s and from the sort of very quite narrow sphere of films that I'm used to seeing. All this, I bet they always talk about the glory days of Hollywood and all that, but it's not even just Hollywood anymore, but golden age.
It's a lovely time for films. Yeah, it really is the golden age. I can't even, I mean, also silent films. I love silent films as well. I mean, if anyone is interested, they should really go and look at John Barrymore's performance in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, which was made in 1920. That movie is superb. There is a part where a spider crawls on a bed and like consumes him. It is like great. Do yourself a favor, go and watch it, and then listen to the Lullaby by The Cure, and then you will just be like really into it. That's what I do. So yeah, you can mix up. You can mix it up. You can mix the eras up. There's nothing to hold you back.
We don't live in boxes.
No, we don't.
Yes.
We don't live in. Thank God, because I would be very uncomfortable. I have a bad back. So,
Well, thank you very much for coming along again, Gabriella. And as per usual, the song that was number 1 in the UK when this film came out, this came out on the 9th of February 1990 in the UK. So, yeah, slight blurring of the lines, but it's a 1989 film. Now, the number 1 over here at the time was Nothing Compares to You. Sinead O'Connor.
It's not bad. Quite like that song.
Yeah.
She was very pretty. Had humongous eyes. My goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a beautiful song. So yay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Play us out.
That's right. The next one will probably be Star Trekking. So sorry. Ugh. Anyway, Gabriella, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really, really appreciate it, and I hope that I can come back sometime and talk too much again.
Well, I know we've got a couple of others on the short list, so yeah, definitely be back soon. This podcast was brought to you by executive producer Gary West, Fergus Higginson, Keith Foster, Jimmy Fletcher, and Mark Drakes, associate producer Chris Oakley. You can find out more by visiting patreon.com/Betamax Video Club.